Hello everyone, welcome in. Since the video done by the spectacular MDJ left me with a few questions as to the validity of the autopsy, I figured it was my duty to go back and check it out, make sure that everything is on the up and up, and double check the question about the umbilical cord, make sure that we have proof the umbilical cord was indeed attached to baby Alex, which we do have. So we will be getting into all of that. We're going to take a look specifically at the parts of the autopsy that I find help prove baby Alex was alive. Before we get into the autopsy talk, I have one thing I've just been kind of thinking about in regards to helping us prove premeditation in this case. And one thing that we do know for certain that the judges said that she thinks she will be allowing into evidence is this hallway video. Now, when Alexee runs to the bathroom, we're going to take a look at this. I have just one thought. I don't see a huge signage. Maybe it's cut off, but I don't see huge signage directing her to a bathroom. Maybe someone told her where the bathroom was. But if we want even the smallest inferences of premeditation, watching her run to this bathroom, she just knows which room in all of these doors in this ER. There's so many ways, hallways and places you can go. She goes directly to the bathroom. I mean, maybe there's an indicator because there is a water fountain next to a bathroom. It seems like a pretty common thing. But again, she knew exactly where to run and runs with a ferocity. Now, I understand that there can be some deniability. Maybe she had seen the bathroom on her way in. Maybe the water fountain here indicates that there's a bathroom, and so she knew where she was going. But if the state does want every little indication of premeditation and that Alexee knew what she was doing, she sure knew where this bathroom was. I know that's not great evidence. I know that's not solid. Gary Mitchell could easily say, well, of course she knew where the bathroom was and she thought she had to poop. But even just getting into the jury's heads that maybe she had been staking out that bathroom since she got in there, since she was brought back into the ER, maybe she looked and knew where she needed to go. Now let's get into the autopsy and explain a little bit more as to hopefully after the prosecutor can play that video, because more than likely they're going to walk through the timeline of the night in the instances. So that video will probably be entered as evidence in the trial very early. You know, it'll be state's exhibit like 1. You know what I mean? And so they're going to enter that very, very quickly, show her running to the bathroom, and then probably use that within Rosa's testimony, because I believe she'll probably be the first one called. That's just my legal prediction. They may call Devin first, but I honestly think they're going to call Rosa first and play this video because Rosa's featured in this video within a minute of her running to the bathroom. Anyway, sorry, I'm kind of getting off topic here, but I do believe systematically they will go through, and then this autopsy is going to be the only thing that they can really argue. So, since there is adequate proof that baby Alex was alive at the time of birth, the only defense is one that Alexee started to alibi herself with when she got caught, which is that the baby appeared dead. It does not excuse her actions, but if the jury can believe beyond a reasonable doubt that Alexee truly believed the baby was dead, then she didn't intentionally murder him. So the more signs of life that we have to prove Alexee is allegedly lying when saying the baby showed no signs of life, those are dire. We need those. I would bet anything that one of the few questions on the polygraph that was done for Alexee is, did you think baby Alex was alive? Worded however it may be, but that will be the whole gist of the polygraph, and that will be the main question on the polygraph, seeing as that is the only excuse for putting the baby in the trash. In our opinions, obviously there's no excuse for putting the baby in the trash. Legally, things are a little different with burden of proof, okay? So if they can convince the jury that the baby looked dead to Alexee, maybe she didn't intentionally murder him. That is their whole case, okay? This creates burden for the defense because first off, they have to convince the jury that this live baby appeared dead. And this also creates a burden for the state because we cannot prove if the baby looked dead or alive to Alexee. We can only try to prove that since it had so many signs of life post-mortem, that he would have been showing signs of life before being placed in the trash bag. Okay, so this gets to where legally we have to prove that Alexee knew he was alive. Do I think we can? Yes, because I don't think the longer, like Gary Mitchell says, that this trial is going to go on forever, that, he wants to drag it out. Well, the longer the jury sits there with all this information in their face, the more likely they are to convict, in my opinion. If I was Gary, I would get in, get out, hammer them with doubt, and just bounce, right? And try and smack it and act like this prosecutor doesn't know, their butt from a hole in the ground, or whatever the saying is. He's gonna draw it out. Juries don't like that. They hate that. You're interrupting their life to make them talk about a dead baby, okay? And he wants to drag it out. Well, the longer we all have looking at the evidence, what happens? The more we get convinced that she is guilty, and the more premeditation we find, even in little instances, right? Even like I was showing with the video earlier, how she ran to the bathroom knowing exactly where the bathroom was, targeting that bathroom. I know that sounds crazy, but if you're the prosecutor, you need to make a big deal out of every little thing Alexee did, especially if a bunch of other evidence is going to get thrown out. And we don't know that yet, but if we're operating off the fact that maybe, well, it's not maybe, the judges in criminal trials often will favor the defense because they are trying to minimize issues for appeal. Who does appeals? The defense. The state can't do an appeal. If they lose, right? And if the person's found not guilty, they can't try again. They can only try again on a mistrial, but they don't do an appeal. The judge, it's in their best interest to, pad the defense with as much favorable decisions as they can that aren't against the rules at all, but help the defense, because that's just the American system. We don't want to punish the defendant while on trial, right? The punishment comes after they've been found guilty. They deserve a fair shake, and because of appeals, judges are more favorable. So if we can prepare that maybe we find no good legal reason for this evidence to be thrown out, we have to understand that the judge is making a decision to minimize appeals. And it would be a very strong conviction if we have minimal evidence and are still able to get a guilty verdict for Alexee. That would minimize the appeals process. And oftentimes when you plead, you will get some kind of deal, right? Let's say it's a huge charge like murder one, like Alexee's being charged with. If you were to plead guilty, and let's say they have enough that they don't want to let you plead down to a different charge, but you plead guilty to that charge, the maximum life in prison is usually, you usually get, the years, not the life, right? So if it's 30 years in prison or life or whatever, or 30 years to life, you're probably going to get 30 years, and you're probably going to get some good time and some time and a half and get out earlier than even that, unless you're a troublemaker and causing issues while in prison. So if you are a model inmate, you can get out on, pretty severe charges, especially if you plead. If you don't plead, the opportunity of getting out earlier goes away in a lot of senses, right? I mean, you can still try, you can still have an appeals, you can still be a model inmate, but because you fought and lost, it's kind of a different situation with life. If you plead and make the state's job a little easier, they're not going to punish you as hard. It's kind of like a child who, if you have a kid and your kid's lying to you and you're trying to ask them to come clean about whatever bad thing they did, the punishment probably for them would be less severe if they came clean and was like, yeah, sorry, I did it. I'm the one who broke the thing, or yes, I snuck out, or whatever thing a parent might be mad at. You're probably more likely to punish the kid when you know that they did it and they're lying to you, because that is showing some really bad character traits, right? So that's kind of the same thought process in the law. When you are willing to admit what you did wrong, I'm not saying you don't deserve a defense, but when you are willing to be like, I messed up, I did a bad thing, whatever, you're more likely to get a way better sentence. So, and I know I'm just a lowly paralegal, but those are facts. So with this autopsy, I went back and looked for very specific things about the lungs, the brain, the eyes, and the umbilical cord. The umbilical cord specifically because MDJ said that if the umbilical cord was not attached, that baby Alex could not have suffocated because baby Alex would have died of blood loss before suffocation was possible. I did find in the autopsy where it says the umbilical cord is attached, so we will double check that. The eyes I was looking for because just I don't know specifically, but I've always heard from true crime shows and things like that that you can tell if someone was suffocated by their eyeballs, that things happen in their eyes. So the brain and the lungs are also the two most important things to look for because those show oxygen as well as oxygen deprivation, right? So let's check this out. I'm not going to read through everything, but I will talk about these points that I highlighted. The trash bag he was found in was tied closed when it was found. So that part just stuck out to me because all of the other accounts of the trash bag said it was wrapped up. And, how I picture it is when you have a trash bag that has like a longer end and, it's not full of trash, you spin the bag and kind of wrap the top part of the bag that has been spun underneath it and it secures the bag. It is possible that she actually tied closed the bag because this bag was delivered to the medical examiner, and that is the medical examiner's wording. Now, I am trusting the medical examiner's wording over the statements made because, number one, everyone that night was in a state of shock. Look, we can say that point blank period. Does it mean they're lying? No, not at all. It does not mean that their statements or their testimony based on those statements won't be factual. It just means that we can excuse some small factual inaccuracies that we don't see them saying in malice, right? They're not saying those things in bad faith. They're not trying to lie on purpose. There are small facts that people get wrong who were at the scene of the crime all the time. But if they did not say that the trash bag was tied, but this says it was tied, I'm sure we will have photos of the bag. There will be that we have not seen that haven't been released that will show if it was tied or not. If we can operate off the premise that that bag was tied, that is huge intent for the jury. That is huge intent. Like, you didn't want any air getting in the bag. The defense can try and argue that she felt it was going to leak or there was just a natural habit to tie trash bags, okay? But the state will also be able to say that she guaranteed there was no air in that bag because you know how that differs from the other case from New Mexico. Apparently there was a loose hair tie around the Alexis Avila baby bag that was thrown into the dumpster, and air was still able to get into the bag. The baby was, essentially freezing and getting very cold, but there was not a lack of oxygen for that baby, and that saved the baby's life. In this case, if the autopsy's wording is true to the facts and not just a figure of speech, which, I mean, this is a medical examiner, I would hope that their words would be true to the facts and not a figure of speech, then this bag was tied closed. Tied closed. I don't care about the witness statements saying it was, twisted up or rolled under. I also think that this witness statement proves that the bag was indeed tied, because why else rip it?
But it was all it was rolled up. So I had to tear it apart. And then, of course, I saw the baby in there. So I pulled the baby out, got him on the bed, checked for signs of life. There was absolutely no life whatsoever.
Okay, so as you can see there, I do find it to be extremely important that HT ripped the bag open, and then this autopsy says the bag was tied closed, meaning she tied a knot in the top of the bag. That is a lot of intent if we can prove that there were signs of life from the baby. Now, the lungs were aerated. Here's my next highlight. The lungs were aerated and there is air in the stomach. Good luck to Chris Sperry denying those facts. Why would there be air in the lungs and stomach if the baby was not alive, if the baby never breathed? Again, The jury's going to have to believe that this living, breathing baby didn't live and breathe in front of Alexee, but as soon as he was put into a bag, he started breathing. I'm no medical expert, but I just don't believe that. All right, so this next highlight is probably the one that upset me the most. Now, I've had to make this disclaimer many times. I'm not a medical expert. I am a paralegal. Part of being in the legal field, even if you specialize in one area, you sometimes have to learn about a lot of things or learn how to figure out what things mean that you have no clue about. Medical information is one of those for me. But with that being said, I spent a good amount of time last night researching this. And when there's no other signs in this autopsy of other things that cause an adrenal hemorrhage, like a bleeding disorder or a tumor that is bleeding or anything like that. The other like a cause of adrenal hemorrhage is severe physical distress. So that means to me that baby Alex did struggle, and he struggled to get air, is what that means. It can be seen from other things, but I don't see the other indicators in this autopsy. So that one really struck me. It really hit me because that is probably the most, this whole time that I have avoided really going through the autopsy, and I wanted to just make sure it would legally hold up by the procedures that they used. I did not want to look into what all this medical information means. The people who will testify to this, and trust me, it has been said by the Court TV people, this will be a battle of the experts. I don't think it's a very fair battle. The expert for the, Team Trevizo is, in my opinion, pretty bad. But there will be testimony about this and battling back and forth as to if the baby was dead or alive, and or if he showed signs to Alexee of being dead or alive. And this is one of the signs that I think will be harped on by the state's medical examiner, their witness, to prove that you had to know this baby was alive. In the video with where we went through MDJ's information that we are all very grateful for. She is not only hilarious in her presentation, but also very informative, and I appreciate her video. She brought up a few issues when talking about the blood loss through the umbilical cord. Number one being, like I said earlier, if baby Alex indeed bled out or not, and if he could not have suffocated if he was bleeding out. But also, if that bag wasn't full of blood and the umbilical cord wasn't leaking blood out and no blood was being pumped in the bag, that could also indicate possibly that Alexee suffocated baby Alex herself. That was also a thought that I had never wrapped my head around. I guess that is too personal of a way of killing the baby for me to understand. I obviously don't understand putting a baby in a bag to let him suffocate, but I couldn't even believe that you could possibly suffocate a baby yourself. Now, Dr. Chris Featherstone, I know I reference him all the time, but he is the one place we can go to look to understand neonaticide as compared to Alexee. And he says that strangulation is often the means used to kill a baby. So obviously, this is all speculation. I don't claim to know for certain that this baby was suffocated, but this sentence here indicates, since no other causes for adrenal hemorrhage are present in this autopsy findings, that the severe physical stress would probably be the only indicator. Now, do you think if he had this gets into the defense theory also that the morphine killed the baby. I looked into how respiratory depression in overdoses of, opiates like morphine, fentanyl, and heroin, all those kind of drugs that, suppress your breathing. Now, that is, for lack of a better term, a very peaceful suppression of the breathing. I don't know if any of you have ever seen anyone on heroin, morphine, these kind of drugs. They very much, quote, nod off, right? It's a term used for these kind of drug users. They nod off. What often happens in an overdose of these type of drugs is a slow depression of the respiratory system, meaning they slowly stop breathing. They don't suffocate, okay? They don't have a panic response like we're seeing because of an adrenal hemorrhage. They're not, panicking or suffocating inside there. Very slowly, the medicine is slowing down. All those medications are slowing down their respiratory system to the point that it stops. They don't physically suffocate. It's a very different presentation in how they have a lack of air. Okay. Now, I know I'm not a medical expert, but if that tracks and follows, and if any of the couple medical experts that I do have who follow along could second that or correct me if I'm wrong, but from my research, they don't seem, meaning people who overdose on morphine and heroin and fentanyl, those kind of medications, do not show the types of hemorrhages that suffocation is. It's just a slow stopping of their breathing, very calm. And that's why you don't see signs of struggle. They're not like, and stuff like that. They just pass away in their overdose. And I'm sorry if this is a sensitive topic for anyone. I know this is a huge epidemic in our country right now. So I'm sorry if you or anyone has been touched by this kind of drug use. I know how prevalent it is. I know that they can be here one day and gone the next. So I'm very sorry if this is personal or triggering for anyone. But in the difference between the morphine in baby Alex's system and the typical presentation of an overdose on morphine, it does not appear that that would be the cause of baby Alex's death, in my opinion. Okay, so we can move on to my next highlighted portion here, which is there was non-specific vascular congestion, which can be seen in hypoxia, among other things. Now, that's our second mention of hypoxia, aka lack of air. Now, a vascular congestion in the brain is an obstruction of the normal flux of blood within the blood vessel network of the brain. Now, a question I have for any of our medical experts: do any of these indicators of lack of air also indicate a manual strangulation versus the entrapment findings? The air in the lungs and stomach and no evidence of decomposition is consistent with the baby having been born alive. All right, let's go on to the next one. Under examination, it says no petechial hemorrhage are identified on the sclerae, conjunctivae, facial skin, or oral mucosa. Now, so one of y'all in the comments had a very astute observation saying that all of your babies, when born, needed to have their airways cleared, or you got like some kind of mucus out of the mouth, and you were wondering about if there was any of that in baby Alex. It seems to say here that no, there was no oral mucosa. So great thought, great find, because it's actually literally mentioned in the autopsy. So really good thought on that. Now this is where it gets to a very important fact. This is where MDJ was saying that if Alexee had ripped the umbilical cord off the baby, the blood would have been everywhere and been going crazy. Some of you disagreed at the amount of blood. You thought it was a lot of blood when I said the cleanup after Alexee cleaned up isn't that much blood, which to me, I was saying mainly because I don't think she ripped the umbilical cord off of baby Alex, because it didn't seem like there was crazy spurts of blood. If blood is spurting out, from what I've seen before, that is going to hit the roof. That is going to hit, the tops of the walls. That is going to hit places where Alexee would not have been able to clean up. So to me, it appeared that the umbilical cord had to have remained attached to baby Alex. But the question that MDJ did leave me with was, would blood leak out of the umbilical cord into that bag until baby Alex stopped breathing? Because if that is a fact, then we might have an indication that Alexee did manually strangle baby Alex versus the bag and the lack of air being what killed baby Alex. This very much should be discussed with the state and their witnesses and get these medical facts down and know for a fact so that Chris Berry, the expert witness for the defense, can't cause any doubt in the jury's mind as to this autopsy being wrong. If there's any issue with the finding of the being in the bag as the entrapment, we want to still have the lack of air being the cause of death, because if it's not the bag, then she strangled him, because the signs of physical stress from the adrenal hemorrhage, is that an indicator that the baby was just suffering in the bag and suffocating in there, and it still it so much so that it caused an adrenal hemorrhage? Or is that more than likely caused by a manual strangulation? Who knows? I don't know, but medical experts might be able to figure this out, and it would be very important for the state to want to get that story straight so that there's no doubt. But again, if there is an issue like MDJ brought up with the umbilical cord leaking blood, and there's not any testimony as to an extreme amount of blood being in that bag, it does lead you to think that the baby maybe wasn't breathing before being put into the bag. Unless we are just thinking I'm reading too much into what MDJ said, and the medical examiner would have made note of that if it was an issue, but maybe the blood loss wouldn't have been so rampant out of the umbilical cord. But I still have that question now, which we don't want to have a question. So we need to make sure that we can try and cover all these bases and make sure that there's no questions that Chris Berry can try and cause any doubt on. Now, this next highlight up at the top, medical intervention, no signs of medical intervention, is very important, because one way to try and disprove the air in the lungs and stomach would be if Alexee attempted CPR or attempted to revive baby Alex in that bathroom, and we would have no way to prove if she did or didn't. It's her word against ours with that. I do find that to be a very short-sighted and stupid defense, because why on earth would you care enough to attempt yourself to manually revive a dead infant or a struggling infant and not attempt to get help from any of the medical professionals outside of the room? That will not track with the jury. I believe the jury will feel, quite frankly, insulted by that defense. So I don't think it will be brought up unless I think Gary's smart enough to know that that would be stupid. Maybe, the client or whatever, meaning Alexee or her mom, can try and push for that. But I hope he would explain that that is a very stupid and short-sighted defense. You're not going to explain, you might be able to explain the air in the lungs and stomach via CPR, but you're not going to explain the adrenal hemorrhaging and all the other signs that we're finding of suffocation. You just can't have it both ways, That's very, for those of you who tuned into those videos, that's very Charlie Adelson of you, to say the least, right? That's a very unbelievable defense, and unbelievable defenses feel like lies to the jury. And when the jury feels like they're being lied to, you are done. And, I think it was 4 hours that they came back with Charlie Adelson's guilty verdict. And by all accounts, most of that was probably filling out the paperwork and all of the things you have to do procedurally in and out of that jury room. So most of that time was not spent deliberating, I'll tell you that. Maybe an hour and a half, I don't know. But most of that time was spent just filling out the forms, telling everyone that the jury's back, and that's it. So they were insulted. You can infer that. Now we're going to get to what I believe is the second mention. Now, this screenshot here, the second one towards the bottom, is from the neurology report, just focusing basically on the brain, not the full autopsy, but I believe this is the second mention of the vascular congestion in the brain, meaning that the blood was not getting to the brain correctly. Now, something else that I found was where it says the dura shows in intact red blood cells. Cells are within the dura, intradural hemorrhages. So there is blood in the brain that hemorrhaged, right? Intradura. So let me go over here to make sure I get my, I would like to share this page. This is an article about non-traumatic acute subdural hemorrhage. Okay, so due to very cranial venous hypertension, essentially what is mentioned in the neuropathy for baby Alex. If you go down here, in layman's terms, this means that a hemorrhage that happens in the brain without trauma, meaning no one hit their head or, got some kind of traumatic injury which caused the subdural hemorrhage. Okay. Sorry, again, I'm not a medical expert. Here is some interesting things I found. Found dead in benign circumstances without obvious cause or prior to autopsy. Most people, they just were found dead, okay? The next highest was a seizure event. Now, suspicious for assault. I don't know if that would mean, being suffocated or not, but if they don't have a head trauma in an assault, that would probably be a strangulation of some sort, probably hands. Found in open water, possibly drowned. That one's significant to us because drowning would cause a similar hematoma in the brain to being suffocated. So 2 were found there. A ligature strangulation. 1. Submerged in bathtub, so possibly drowned. 2. These say to me that you often find non-traumatic subdermal hemorrhages in the brain when lack of oxygen is present and possible strangulation or suffocation happens. So I found that one to be important. Now we can get into the respiratory system. The first highlight is the upper and lower airwaves are unobstructed. Now that is obviously very important because they can't claim that anything was in there causing baby Alex to suffocate. Also, like one of the commenters brought up, very, very smart, the mucosa that appears to be in newborns was not present. So I don't know what that could indicate. Maybe an expert could tell us. Does that mean that the baby coughed it out? Does that mean that the baby breathed out so well that it pushed out the mucosa? What does it mean that there was no oral mucosa in baby Alex when typically it seems as though that needs to be removed from a newborn? Could that indicate that the baby was going to cry or cough or something like that as to where the mucosa was dislodged? And what else could that indicate for us? If anyone has any medical information, I would appreciate that. Now, there is no saddle embolus in the situ examination of the pulmonary trunk. My apologies if I mess that up. This stuck out to me because I was like, well, what is a saddle embolus? I needed to look it up. A saddle embolus is a rare type of acute pulmonary embolism that can lead to sudden hemodynamic collapse and death. So essentially, there is no indicator that some embolism inside the pulmonary trunk, meaning any of the lung function and the organs that go along with it, there was no sign of an embolism in there either. So that would obviously be a huge indicator of a natural cause of death for the baby and not suffocation or strangulation. Now, I've never in any of my videos clarified suffocation or strangulation. I am going to start doing that until I can clearly and definitively say which one happened, because right now we have some questions that can lead to does the evidence point to the bag not being the cause of death for the baby? That's not a huge issue for us in the sense of that doesn't discount the whole autopsy or anything like that. It actually is completely relevant why they would have put the bag. No one was in the room and knows if Alexee manually strangulated baby Alex or not. When a baby with signs of hypoxia and suffocation are found in a bag, the logical and only conclusion the medical examiner could make in that instance is that the bag is what caused the lack of air for the baby. Seems pretty straightforward. But if there is other medical issues, meaning a lack of blood being leaked from the umbilical cord into the bag, indicating that the heart wasn't pumping and pushing out blood into there, all kinds of things like that. Now, I don't know if that is a fact or not, but the MDJ did seem to indicate that the baby could have or should have bled out by the umbilical cord. And if that wasn't happening, that means blood wasn't being pumped. If blood wasn't being pumped, that means the baby was not breathing before the baby was put in the bag. That doesn't mean that the baby appeared dead to Alexee at all. Quite the opposite. That would actually indicate that Alexee made sure the baby wasn't breathing before putting the baby in the bag. Something a lot of us cannot wrap our heads around, but is a possibility. I have since learned, since I shared that is what my fiance thought, and I actually didn't know when we first discussed this case. It wasn't very in depth. When I was like, this baby, was found in the trash, and this girl didn't tell anyone, and he saw some of the, highlights of the footage. He was like, "Oh man, that's crazy." And then when we rediscussed it a little bit later, he was like, "Well, she suffocated the baby or whatever," and I was like, "What?" Because that never even crossed my mind. So I shared that in the video with MDJ, and some of you had said that you also are under the impression that she suffocated the baby. And so I realized I'd never even explored that as a possibility. And just because the autopsy says that the bag did it, doesn't mean the state might not be even investigating that possibility as well. Because when they do get to talk to all these medical professionals as they're gathering their witnesses, they may be told that, hey, there's some issues here that could actually be worse than now, don't get me wrong when I say this, putting the live baby in the bag is still horrific and terrifying, but it's a little bit less intimate than physically suffocating a baby. It's like a little disassociated, right? Like set it and forget it kind of thing. You can put them in the bag, hide the bag, and start cleaning up and maybe ignore the fact that you put a baby in the bag. I know that's very hard to think about and even say, but I find that to be more understandable, not understandable at all, but I find that to be more, I could see someone doing that rather than suffocating a baby because it's less impersonal, right? And so to be so close to a little tiny infant baby and to think you could try and hurt it yourself and not use like, I don't know, there's a disconnect there for me from physically strangulating a baby to putting it in a bag and suffocating in the bag. Both are disgusting and make me feel horrible. But one would definitely impact the jury more than the other because I could not believe that my fiance thought that she strangled the baby. But a lot of you actually seem to think that, and it does seem to be common in neonaticide, and it's also one surefire way to know that the baby's not going to cry, and that no one's going to be alerted to the fact that there is a baby present in some way, shape, or form. Because as you know, in the Alexis Avila case, that baby was crying, and the dumpster divers thought they heard like a cat or a dog or something that may have been thrown away. It was such a muffled little baby cry that they didn't even identify it as a baby's cry, but they heard it. And so yeah, which another note on that, as part of my investigation into the leaking of the medical records and having to talk with some of the supporters of Alexee Trevizo, I was informed about a poll that they had in which they were trying to figure out what jury selections would be best in the Alexee Trevizo case. And they were saying that they were hoping to get males on the jury. Which to that I say, that is an interesting thought process. Obviously they want to avoid women because women know how hard it would be, especially if you've ever been pregnant, been around someone pregnant, you'd know that it's pretty hard to deny, especially when you don't have a cryptic pregnancy, which is where the baby doesn't, grow like in the typical spot that a baby grows. It can hide up in your ribs or hide somewhere else, and you can actually not present with a pregnant stomach, for lack of a better word, and not know you're pregnant. There's no proof of a cryptic pregnancy here. So most women are going to say, when you don't have a cryptic pregnancy, and how do you not know you're pregnant, kind of thing. So obviously they say they want to get men on the jury. Now, I was like, oh, great, good information. Thanks for letting me know, guys. But in my head, I was like, first of all, I'm like, it's actually against the rules of voir dire to strike someone based off their gender. So Gary Mitchell will have to come up with some very specific and interesting ways to strike his jurors that he doesn't want just because they're women or have had babies or something like that. If you've just had a baby and can say you're not biased, then you're allowed to be on the jury. Sorry, you're going to have to use one of your strikes. And hopefully no one argues that strike that you are striking off a protected class, right? This gets very in-depth legally. I have a video about jury selection. If you guys want to go back over it, we can always do that. It's one of my favorite things. But because it's like the last line of defense, you have you have everything ready that you need, and you need to pick the team that is going to go right for you. And there is a lot of ways that you can go right and go wrong, and there's a lot of strategy and tricky things you can do, but you are bound by some rules. You don't just get to pick and choose the jury of your liking necessarily, unless you can be extremely clever. So that poll that I was told by the leaker and their closest buddies about trying to brag that oh, they're going to get all men on the jury, I find that actually hilarious now, because the small portion of men in my audience, it's mostly women, but there are some dudes out there. What's up, dudes? And my fiance, they all seem to think that she strangled the baby. And I don't think that that's good for the jury. So to the people from Artesia who are watching this and dislike me, my one dislike I get on every video about Alexee that I post immediately. What's up? Hi. Maybe tell all your buddies that, number one, you can't strike people just for being women. Number two, going with men might not be the best idea either, because they are appalled by this and they actually think it's more savage than the women do. So you're pretty much damned if you do and damned if you don't with jury selection in this instance. But that's just a little side tangent, because again, it does all come back down to the jury and what the jury's going to think and believe. And I did get it. I know most all of you are probably not in the group where that poll was posted. So it's kind of like a pro Alexee group. And so, yeah, when they told me about that, I was like, oh, interesting. You guys think that you can strike women for being women, and you think it's a smart idea to put men on the jury. Well, I don't think either of those are going to work out very well for you. Just a small note on jury stuff before we leave, since I already brought it up. People have been like, oh my gosh, like it got so much publicity, this case, like they're not going to be able to find a jury. Just because you heard about the case does not disqualify you as a juror. Like, let's get that out there first and foremost. You could have seen stuff on the news, seen it in passing, whatever. If you do not have an opinion and haven't heard solid facts in that case, and you can say that you can be unbiased, you can get put on that jury. It doesn't matter if people have seen or heard about the case. They may be able to find a select group of people that never have heard about it, but there may be a couple of people that are unbiased who are like, yeah, I think I saw something on the news about it, but I didn't, whatever. It's not a barometer of whether you've seen this case or not. It's a barometer of can you be come from an unbiased place in judgment of Alexee. Now, we all came from an unbiased place, and we all think she's guilty, in my opinion, right? So I have high hopes for jury selection, no matter what they do. Like, they'd have to find a bunch of people who are not in touch with reality, so to speak, to get even a mistrial in this case. But again, that's just my lowly paralegal opinion. If anyone has any information in the audience as far as any of these issues that I have found in the autopsy, possibly indicating a difference in the meaning the autopsy is not wrong, but could these also indicate manual strangulation as opposed to simply the bag? Or does this all still lead to the bag being the cause of, the bag being the cause of death? Because like I've said before in my videos, it's gonna be bag versus morphine. If it comes down to breathing issues, what caused it? We know it's not the morphine. Like I discussed, the morphine wouldn't also cause the types of hemorrhages and the panic responses and the things that we're seeing. That shows that this baby was struggling and trying to get air and freaking out internally. Its body's signals show us that it was struggling so hard to get air that blood vessels are bursting all throughout, right? That's horrible to say and think about, but is that something that's more likely to happen in a bag or from someone actually doing it? I don't know. I do know either way, this autopsy is so solid. Like there is way too many different moving factors in this that indicate that the baby was alive and something very traumatic happened. I don't really see them getting over that hurdle. On Reddit recently, someone asked what you think the sentence and the verdict in this case will be. And I said guilty on both counts, 15 years served out of the 30. That's my honest opinion. That's really what I see happening because there's no way that you can disprove that this baby was alive. And all the surrounding circumstances and all the circumstantial evidence, like New Mexico law defines intent, which is implied by the surrounding circumstances, meaning her running to the bathroom, not opening the door, not asking for help, not telling anyone that she had just had a baby, telling people when confronted with the possibility of a miscarriage that she is a virgin and on her period, yada, yada, yada. All those things infer that this chick did not want anyone to find the baby, in my opinion, right? So that leads us all to the murder one charge, not to mention all the other premeditative and consciousness of guilt type acts that we have before she even gets to the hospital, like the phentermine and telling her mom that she's getting her period every month, things like that, that are basically medically impossible. Yes, you bleed. You can bleed while you're pregnant, but by all medical science accounts, it is not a menstrual cycle. It will not come in a timely manner and it will not present like a typical menstrual cycle. For us women, you should know the difference between some spotting and a menstrual cycle. So again, probably why the Team Trevizo supporters were bragging to me about the phenomenal results of their poll, which overwhelmingly said that men should be on the jury. That's okay because they don't want women there knowing that we know that no, you don't get your period while you're pregnant. You might have some bleeding that you think is your period, but it's not your period. So again, it's your fault for having some type of spotting, gaining a belly, probably being confronted about it by other cheerleaders. That's a possible rumor right now, but knowing how high school works, I think that's more than likely that at some point the whole fat shaming thing did happen where people asked if she was pregnant, asked about the weight gain. She said she's just getting fat and told them to stop fat shaming her, I guess. All of these kind of things, that's maybe going to come up in trial. The whole fat shaming thing, if they have a witness to corroborate that story, can come into trial. They can call a witness who said, I am a cheerleader. I confronted Alexee about being pregnant. She told me she was fat. She told me, I'm fat shaming her, that she's on phentermine and she is trying to lose the weight and she's working out extra hard. That is all really awesome, solid testimony, right? So with that being said, that I don't know if that type of evidence will get in. I am almost positive the state should be able to enter the cheerleading photos and stuff like that as evidence. Gary can try, but what kind of he can't claim privilege on them, and as long as the state obtains them correctly, there is really no issue. So with that being said, this is a bit longer of a video, but I couldn't just leave us with a question about the umbilical cord and everything like that after MDJ's video. So we do know now that the umbilical cord was 100% definitely attached, as you see right here. Attached umbilical cord measures 63 centimeters in length, contains 3 vessels. The umbilical cord is normal in appearance and the placenta end appears torn. The placenta is not received for examination. So we have pretty much proof that Alexee got rid of the placenta. I don't think it's logical to say that the housekeeper threw it away or cleaned it up. Then I think you would have found it. It seems way too big and crazy alien looking of a thing to just have been overlooked, by the housekeeper and not mentioned, like, oh, and I found the placenta. Yeah, it's in another bag in there. You can go look on my cleaning cart. No, she ripped up the placenta, in my opinion. But yeah, that's basically all I have for right now. Like I said, I didn't want to leave us with questions about if the umbilical cord was attached or not. It still leaves us with a question: if any of our medical experts can tell us, would the umbilical cord bleed out with or without the heart pumping? Because that is a very important issue that I would like to have solidified. Because if there should be a whole puddle of blood in that bag, if baby Alex was slowly suffocating in there and the heart was pumping and pushing blood through the umbilical cord, if that's what would have been happening, then why isn't there any documentation of a pool of blood around baby Alex? And if there is no medical reason for the umbilical cord to be leaking blood unless it was severed from baby Alex, then I would really like that to be solidified for me as well, because then we can remove one piece of question we have into the strangulation versus the bag, because I've never really given any thought to that theory until many of you after MDJ's video were saying that you also think strangulation happened, manual strangulation. So now I'm being very careful with how I put this, because there could be differences in the signs of manual strangulation versus slowly losing oxygen in the bag. And I think the one, like I said, was the types of hemorrhages that are indicative of stress. The adrenal gland hemorrhages, the adrenal hemorrhages from severe physical stress. Now, could just being in a bag also be considered severe physical stress and slowly losing oxygen and then, not getting any, or is that more of an indicator of strangulation? So I'm going to keep looking. If any of you medical experts out there can answer down in the comments, I will even, highlight those comments and put them in the next video so that we can discuss and talk about them. And if not, hopefully someone in the medical community will see this and can make some kind of statement for us, even if it's that we don't know, that, that's fine too. But it does raise questions for me, and we don't want questions. We want definitives before we get to trial, because I want to be able to call Gary Mitchell and Chris Sperry out on every little thing they say. I am assuming that the trial is going to be live streamed. I am preparing to stream the whole trial. So I am bracing for us to have the ability to call them out medically. And that is one of my main goals over this next year, is to try and figure all of this medical information out. Because again, I am a layman when it comes to medical issues, but very soon we will go through Chris Berry's medical testimony in the Rosenbaum trial, and we can discuss how the prosecutor in that case really kicks so much butt, because he was very well informed on his medical facts. He just reamed Chris Sperry a new one, and both of those defendants are found guilty, life in prison on child abuse, and ultimately the death of that child. So with that being said, not only do I hope that the state's attorney is ready to call Chris Sperry out on his medical facts, but as we go through it, we will try to as well, call him out for the BS that we believe he'll be perpetrating. Because what you will see, if you are inclined, before I am able to show you, look up the Rosenbaum trial, Chris Sperry's testimony. It's here on YouTube. He is just, oh my goodness, on the stand, it is bad. And so, in my opinion, it's embarrassing, that he would be their expert. You almost wanted to not even come with an expert. Why get this guy? Literally, let's discuss that. Literally, because would you rather not try and disprove the theory of the state, or would you rather get the least believable person on the world to try and disprove their theory for you? I don't know, but that's kind of how it feels when it comes to Chris Sperry. So if anyone out there can answer those questions, I would be eternally grateful. Again, specifically the ones about the umbilical cord and the blood loss. Does that mean that the heart had to stop pumping before being put into the bag, or is there no reason for the umbilical cord to be leaking blood while the heart slowly stopped pumping due to the suffocation? That is basically my main question, because if we can prove that strangulation happened, that is a much more savage act, in my opinion, than the impersonal act of putting a baby in the bag and then just, ignoring that. I know they're both extremely horrific, but I do feel one is a lot more just to do it with your own hands is crazy. So, yeah. Thank you so much if you've made it this far in this video. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please leave them down below, especially if you are a medical professional or have any knowledge or insight into the questions that have been brought up in this video. And I will get back to you as soon as possible. And I do genuinely enjoy the conversation. If you are interested in following this case to trial, please subscribe, as I will be covering it all along the way with a legal focus. It's your Girl Friday. I'll see you in the next video. Okay, bye.